Good morning and welcome to Char Versations. I am Charlene Robinson. I am a mental health therapist. I am also LCAS-A, which means I'm a substance abuse counselor associate, and I am a board certified pastoral counselor. And we are here to erase the stigma of mental health and therapy. There's no shame in asking for help. If you need it, you need it. I saw a t-shirt that said, you need Jesus and a therapist. I kind of liked it. Well, I wanted to talk about Black history, because this is, the last Saturday of the month, of the Black History Month that we're allotted to have, even though Black history is 24/7, 365 days a year, right? So, thought I would just go ahead and do that. All right. Hope you had your coffee or whatever libation you use to get it going in the morning. Ah, yes. Nothing like coffee. All right. In case you were wondering, this is the National Black Anthem as interpreted by Char. And it's not a bad compilation, but it's a little different, a little jazzy. All right, so we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to tune him down. I got a lot going on this morning. All right, so first of all, I'd like to say in regard to Black History Month, Black mental health matters. Just like Black Lives Matter, Black mental health matters. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So it's called Reflections on Our Black History and How That History Has Affected Our Mental Health. About the trauma of it all. You would think that, all the movies about slavery would be irrelevant in the year 2021. But unfortunately, it's not. You know why? Because we still have systemic racism in this country, which we really shouldn't, because we built this. And if we were to shut it down, this whole country would fall flat on its face. But anyway. And these movies would not be irrelevant until, systemic racism is gone. It becomes irrelevant. So slavery is not African history. It's interpreted as African history. Okay? Before the invasion of the Caucasians into Africa, we lived as kings and queens. We were the bomb.com. Okay? We were large and in charge. And then they came. Life was thriving, and then they came. So in my research, because I'm a researcher, I read this article. It was written by this brother, Brandon Jones, and it's called, The Legacy of Trauma, Context of the African American Existence. And wow, it's a 47-page document. He must have did his doctorate thesis on it, but it was awesome, and I gleaned some things from it. Well, a lot of things. There's a lot more in it, but I just tried to grab the stuff that was relevant. It's great research. Kudos to Dr. Brandon Jones. First, let's define exactly what trauma is. Well, before I get to that, let's see, I got all my little, all right. So for many of us, Black history is a reminder of everything our ancestors endured and overcame and are yet overcoming. Even though we reflect on the strength and resilience of African Americans, it is still hurtful and damaging that we are still scared to address our scars and how they affect our mental health. And that's a statement that one of the psychologists of NAMI, which is the National American Mental Health Association, put out. It's real. It's real. All right, so let's define trauma. What exactly it is. And the way Dr. Brandon Jones defined it A quick and dirty definition: it's a deep emotional wound. Wow. A deep emotional wound. Toxic stress comes from toxic environments. And unfortunately, we learn that at an early age. We're going to cover that a little bit later. Well, actually, we're going to get to it now. So from conception to death, we are dealing with this trauma. We as a people have experienced adverse childhood experiences. Usually, I would say almost every Black child experiences words or some type of act of racism. I remember my first experience. I was on the school bus and I was getting off the school bus. I think it was in elementary school. And, because I'm light skinned, I had to deal with that. But then this white boy says to me, he says, "I don't care how light your skin is, you're still a nigger." And I was in so much shock, I couldn't even react because I had never heard that come from anybody's mouth. Like, that word just wasn't used. And I was just in shock. And my girlfriend said, "Come on, let's go. Because she had already experienced racism. I had not. This was when I first came to Jersey, because I was in New York schools. In New York schools, we didn't deal with that. It just didn't happen. So I got in the class, and it bothered me all day. I mean, I was quiet all day. I got home, and I told my mom what happened. And she said, "Honey, let's have the conversation." And this is still happening today, that you still have to have that conversation with your children. All right, so then we have the social, emotional, and cognitive impairment impact that affects our psyche. The adoption of health risk behaviors, drug and alcohol, which we're going to cover that. Then we have to deal with disease, disability, and social problems. And we're still dealing with that. And that can lead to early death. Toxic stress damages the brain. Okay? I know a lot of people are like, well, you can have a traumatic brain injury and that damages the brain. You can not have any physical injury to your brain and still be damaged. Strong, frequent, and prolonged adversity. This type of response can possibly disrupt typical development. Hello. All right, so let's get into it. All right, have you ever heard of this term? Because I had never heard of it. Epigenetics. What? Yeah, epigenetics. It is how the experiences of previous generations can affect who we are. We talked a little bit about this before, about breaking generational curses. We talked about it. In many ways, epigenetics is the ultimate intersection between your lifestyle, your health, and perhaps even the health of your children. Lifestyle meaning diet, stress, exercise, can change the way your genes are exposed. Wow. Okay. It can change your health, your risk for disease, and your general well-being. And I know you're all thinking, well, wait a minute, we're talking about racism and Black history? Yes. This is the effect you can have. Notice your life experience shapes who you are, okay, and how you grow. But when you have been exposed to toxic stress, racism, which most Black people have been, generation after generation after generation, and it control risk for conditions such as, check this out, obesity, diabetes, anxiety, and depression. Name me one person that you don't know that has at least one of those. I'll give you a minute to think. Okay. Most of our family suffer from one or more of these conditions. Let's talk about historical trauma for a few minutes. History is not about the past. It's about the present. Okay, and that's a quote from Dr. Eli Catty. So historical trauma caused by events that target a group of people, us, even family members who have not directly experienced the trauma can feel the effects of the event generations later. Can we get an amen? Yes, it goes down the line. Now, here's a term I hadn't heard of before either. Maybe you have. PTSS. That's not PTSD. That's not post-traumatic stress syndrome. This is PTSS. That is post-traumatic slave syndrome. Wow. Yeah, that's a moment to think about. It was developed by Dr. Joy DeGore. 12 years of research, and he came up with this term. So here's what it means. It is a condition that exists as a consequence of chattel slavery. I'm going to explain what that is. Followed by institutionalized racism and oppression have resulted in multi-generational adaptive behavior. Some positive, reflecting resilience, and others that are harmful and destructive. So that means some stress that we experience is good, and there's some that is totally damaging. So what is chattel slavery? Chattel slavery is personal property bought and sold as commodities like cattle. Then that's what was going on with us. And when you think about it, when I used to work for corporate America, we used to call it the corporate plantation, because guess what? That's the same thing. You were working to make somebody else's dream come true. And you're working for a fixed salary. You know, you're working for maybe minimum wage, but it's corporate slavery. Let's call it what it is. All right. So our people have been through some stuff. And you think that we're not going to have some kind of mental health issue? Come on, people. Let's think about this. We have got to, and I talk about it all the time, we have got to practice self-care more than anything, than ever. Because not only do we have this pandemic, the coronavirus, we got the pandemic of systemic racism that Trump exposed very well. If you didn't know whether this country was racist or not, you better know now. Okay? The past 4 years, all it did was show what was really there the whole time. That means half the country has been racist and hates you. Okay? And the other half is cool. You don't know which half you're looking at when you go out. Okay, let's get back to it. All right, so from Jim Crowism, 1865 to 1965, to the Great Migration of Urbanizing Blacks, 1915 and 1968, to the ghetto and welfare. And you thought that was us that did that. 1968 to 1975, when drugs and crime and family disintegration took a heavy toll on folk who lived in the inner city, which led a lot of people, a lot of families, to single parenthood. That's another moment to think about. Then the Monahan Report, remember that? Came out in 1965. The Negro family, I hate that word. The case for national action under President Lyndon B. Johnson. Everybody loved that president. I don't know why. But anyway, check out the key findings. Black people have never been accepted into the American dream. That's what came out of that report. The matriarchal system does not work within American Western system. It's been working in our system for a long time. Not that it should have. Black men must have employment. Well, what happened to that theory? And repairing the black family is key. Really? Not according to what we're looking at right now. But okay. Then, hypoghetto and prison. That was 1975 to 1990. Extreme concentration of poverty and underprivileged groups. That's hyperghetto. That's what they actually have a name for that. Blacks and whites use and sell drugs, but blacks are 20 times more likely to go to jail. Hence, matriarchal system. Because that caused a lot of women to be single parents because their men were in jail because they were hustling and selling drugs and then ended up using them. They got caught and they got jailed. That's still going on today. Okay. Drugs had major impact on the women and children. Of course they did. Oh, and concentrated police presence. Do we not still have that now? Yeah. Then institutionalized generation, 1985 to now. This developed after the crack era, mid-80s to the present. Remember the movie Losing Isaiah? That was happening. All right. So this, well, let's see, enriched service providers outside of the family. That happened. Social workers and jails. It changed our whole mindset. Okay. It created inferiority and dependent culture, hence welfare. The element of internalized oppression and extreme level of helplessness. Okay? So much for the history. We know the history. We live the history. But let's look at what's happening right now. The new Jim Crow. Increasingly high numbers of mass incarceration, both men and women. Orange is the New Black. When that show first came out, that turned me off just because of the title. I'm like, seriously? Okay. And people, oh, that's such a good show. I don't care. I don't like the title. All right. Help not needed. We have high levels of Black unemployment. They talk about unemployment as, across the country, but they don't talk about how high it is in our community. ADHD. Where did that come from? When we were young and running around and acting cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, our parents knew how to slap us down and calm us down. Now we have a diagnosis and we medicate for that. Wow. High numbers of Black children being over-diagnosed with ADHD and ODD, which is oppositional disorder. It's like, really? Really? No, they just need some discipline. They don't need no medication or a diagnosis. Anyway, we were talking about throwaway children, high levels of Black children in foster care, adoption, transitional housing, etc., and fragile family dynamics. Everybody is somewhere other than home. We're continuing to talk about the effects of Black history on our mental health. Okay, so know this, that the trauma is passed generationally. Hurt people hurt people. And if they don't hurt themselves first. Violent people are not born. They are bred. Why? Because it's a learned behavior. And we live in a violent and bullying society. All right. So what to do? We have to shift our thinking. We have to have universal goals. Security, we need to have, even though we have the conflict in our society, we've got to be safe. We have to be able to identify and our worth. First of all, we have to realize that we are worth, more than what society says we are worth. And belonging, we have to have a sense of connection with others in our relationships, in our family, in our social circles, our friends, and our community. Now, trauma affects both social and emotional intelligence. Hearing, we often miss the point of what people are actually saying to us. I mean, sometimes, you can listen to a conversation and your brain is already thinking about a response and you're really not hearing what people are saying. And sometimes we have to slow our brains down. Okay? We have to just slow it down and focus on what the person is saying. I know the counselors that are on the line, sometimes we have a tendency to do that, especially when people really aren't talking about anything. But we have got to focus. Communication, not being assertive enough or being too aggressive. See, there's a difference between reacting and responding. When you react, it's just, you don't even put any thought in it. Like I think I said in one live that if a Karen were to walk up to me, it wouldn't be a response. It would be a reaction. And it wouldn't be a good one. Okay. But responding means you've taken some time to think about what you're about to say or respond before you, get violent. All right. Our ability to take risk. We really, because we are so resilient, we should be able to jump into something that we know God has said, okay, just go do it. Just do it. But we make excuses. I'm not going to try that because, and then here come the excuses. But in order, most entrepreneurs, those who have made it and are rich and are wealthy, they took a risk. Okay? Now, I just want to thank Brandon Jones for this research. This is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to look at that paper, it's called The Legacy of Trauma, Content of the African American Existence. Excellent work. But change is up to us. Okay, change is really up to us. One person at a time. One races that you encounter at a time. Some you can talk to. Some is so ingrained, I don't care how much you talk to them. It's not going to change them. But in our community, we must be honest and change our thoughts, our speech, and our actions in order to, just to have any, I cannot read my writing here. Okay. Anyway, we have to really watch what we say, what we do, and what we think. We are perceived as strong, for we are a tenacious and resilient people. But that shouldn't be solely because of suffering. We have been through a lot. But just because people know that we're strong and, they can handle it, or you can give them more work, they'll do it. True, we can. But we have choices. We don't have to. Okay? When I left my full-time job, I made a choice. I was like, you know what? I knew I could be there for the rest of my life if I wanted to, but I was not willing to travel 40 minutes one way every day, and in the midst of a, COVID. I'm like, no, not going to do that. So I made an active decision. I said, you know what? I want to work solely from home, and that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be a little tight, but it's going to be okay in the long run. So I'm making moves. So I took a risk. Okay, God said so. He got us. I'm good with it. Okay. And then, it was something, because when this month started, I thought about, I was like, Black History Month, here we go. We celebrate Black History 24/7, 365 days a year. You know why? First of all, this color don't change. We may get a little darker in the summer, but it's just, you know what I'm saying? It's the same. So anyway, the only thing that it does is that it just reminds us of what we've been through. And it's time for us to rebuild our own well-being. It's time for America to address the healing, because we need to be healed. Of course, we can ask God to heal us, and He will, especially when we have those recent experiences of racism, and, it stirs up something in us. It's just, you know what I mean. But at the same time, it's time for corporate America and as a whole to address the healing that needs to start and happen in the African American community. It's time. It's past time. It's overdue. 401 years. 401 years. Think about that. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of anguish. And it's interesting as I hear some of my white friends say, well, why are Black people so angry? Why are Black men so angry? Really? You have to ask? We know why we're angry. We're sick of the white privilege. Okay? There's a lot that has to be done, a lot of work that has to be done, and we need to hold this president accountable. We didn't put you in office just for you to be there. Okay? We didn't hold Obama accountable. We're going to hold this one accountable. And Kamala, we're looking to you too. All right? But the only way we're going to affect change is to get on the local level. Go to your city council meetings. Most of them are online right now. Find out when they meet. Get involved. Write letters to your congressman and your senator. Because there's some things on the table that we need to push. And if we don't push them, it's not going to get done. All right. So, thank you for joining me for Char Versations. I know this was an interesting one. We got, the first video stalled, but, we're just going to have part 1 and part 2 today. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining Char Versations. This is also going to be on YouTube. I'll download it over there because the picture here is much better than YouTube for some reason. Okay, see you next week. God bless.